The ancient Egyptians believed that one day they would die. And when they do, they will need to have their affairs in order to ensure a smooth transition into the afterlife. So, in this video, we are going to tell you all about what they did to prepare themselves for death. Welcome back to the channel. One of the most striking things about the ancient Egyptians is their obsession with death. The massive pyramids they built were largely tombs for their dead pharaohs. They mummified their dead so they could be preserved for eternity, and they even went as far as to bury entire cities full of people who had died during plagues. But despite all of this, they were not afraid of death. In fact, they saw it as an adventure to be embraced, not feared. For example, Rahatep, an Egyptian official who lived around 2500 BC, was quite fond of death. In his autobiography, he wrote, "Behold, I am Rahatep, who loves the great of Prar. There is nothing that causes me more delight than contemplating the sky at dawn, singing the praises of my Lord, while sailing down the river of the underworld. Come, let us go and adore him." Of course, Rahatep's eagerness to die might have something to do with the fact that his body was found buried alongside a small boat, suggesting that he was happy to move on to the next stage of his journey. In general, the Egyptians viewed death as a transition, a temporary pause in a person's existence before moving on to the next phase of life in another realm. To them, the physical world was just one of many stages in the journey of the soul, which began at birth and continued through death and beyond. This belief is summed up in the famous quote from the Book of the Dead, "I know not another land which is like unto Egypt, the place of everlasting life," in order to make the transition into the afterlife as smooth as possible. The Egyptians performed a number of rituals both before and after death. Some of these rituals were quite simple, such as placing the deceased's favorite foods and drink in their tombs so they would have sustenance on their journey. Others were more complex, such as the mummification process, which was designed to preserve the body and allow the soul to travel freely. The Egyptians believed that the soul, or Ka, was the essence of a person and what made them who they were. When someone died, their Ka left their body and needed to be able to travel freely in order to visit their loved ones. If the body was left to decay, the Ka would be trapped inside and unable to move on. So it was important to preserve the body as much as possible. Mummification was a lengthy process that took several weeks. First, the organs were removed from the body and placed in separate coffins. Then the body was washed and wrapped in linen. Finally, it was placed in a coffin and buried. Sometimes the bodies were also covered in resin and painted to make them look like the living. In addition to preserving the body, the Egyptians also placed a number of objects in the tomb that would help the deceased on their journey. These objects included food, drink, clothing, jewelry, and weapons. The Egyptians believed that the deceased would need these items in the afterlife, just as they had needed them in the physical world. By providing these items, the living could ensure that their loved ones would be comfortable and safe on their journey. It wasn't just the body that needed to be prepared for the afterlife, however. The Egyptians also had special rituals for dealing with the hair and fingernails of the deceased. It was believed that the hair and nails continued to grow after death and, if left unchecked, would become a nuisance. To prevent this, the Egyptians would cut the deceased's hair and nails before burial, then place the clippings in a special container and bury it alongside the body. Death rituals weren't just about preparing the body and the soul for the afterlife, though. They were also about helping the family of the deceased to cope with their loss. In ancient Egypt, it was common for family members to mourn for up to 70 days after a death, and there were specific rituals for each day of the mourning period. On the first day, for example, the family would shave their heads and tear their clothes in half. On the 30th day, they would shave their eyebrows and put on new clothes. Finally, on the 70th day, they would sacrifice a goat to the gods of the underworld and offer prayers for the deceased. The ancient Egyptians believed that death was not the end, but only a beginning. They took this belief to heart, and their rituals reflected their deep reverence for life and death alike. While some of their practices may seem strange to us today, they offer us a unique window into the beliefs and values of one of the most fascinating civilizations in history. Now, speaking of preservation, did you know that you can actually preserve your own body after you die? Maybe you want to be remembered forever, or maybe you do and want to miss out on future technological advances that could help you live longer. Whatever your reasons, there are ways to keep your body alive long after you've died. One option is to have your body cryogenically frozen. This involves preserving your body at a very low temperature, typically liquid nitrogen, which is kept at 196 degrees Celsius. Proponents of cryonics believe that one day technology will be able to revive people from their frozen state, allowing them to live again. Of course, this is pure speculation, and there is no scientific evidence that it is possible to revive a cryogenically frozen person. However, that hasn't stopped people from trying. There are currently around 200 people who have been cryogenically frozen in the United States alone. Another option is to have your body turned into a diamond. This process, which is known as cremation, involves taking your cremated remains and mixing them with a binding agent to form a synthetic diamond. The diamond is then allowed to grow over time, eventually forming a beautiful crystal that can be cherished by loved ones. It's unclear how long it takes for the diamond to fully form, but it is said to be worth the wait. Finally, there is the option of having your body turned into a star. This process, which is only available to the super wealthy, involves launching your body into space where it will eventually explode as a supernova. Your remains will be scattered across the universe, literally becoming part of the stars and planets. So, what will you choose when your time comes? Will you be cryogenically frozen, turned into a diamond, or sent into space as a supernova? Let us know in the comments below. What about the mummies of ancient Egypt? Did they ever wake up? That's right, one of the most famous mummies in the world woke up in 2009. Well, sort of. You see, this mummy was being displayed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo when it started moving. At first, visitors thought it was a hoax, but it soon became clear that the mummy was actually alive. Of course, it wasn't a miracle. The mummy had simply been stitched together incorrectly, allowing her to enter the tomb and causing the body to bloat. Eventually, the museum officials realized what had happened and the mummy was returned to its original state. But not before giving everyone a good scare. Do you think mummies are real? If so, would you ever visit a museum to see one for yourself? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos. We've got lots of interesting stuff planned, including more videos about ancient Egypt. You definitely don't want to miss those. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.